Hey guys, welcome to Did You Get That on Film? On this podcast, we deep dive into horror movies, and so it is full of explicit content as well as spoilers. Please be advised. Now, let's get to the show.
This is Did You Get That on Film, where we discuss characters in terrible situations that we never find ourselves in. I'm your host, DP, and with me, as always, my personal TSA and co host, Ruth. Ruth, how are you doing?
I am doing pretty good in this post-racial America that we're living in right now.
I was thinking more of this travel season because it's summertime when we're recording it, so it's a really good time to have your own personal TSA.
No, but seriously, no, I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited for a brand new episode of the podcast.
I don't know anything about post-racial America, but okay.
That's, well, if you don't want to think about it, then you picked the wrong movie.
I don't think it exists.
That's exactly. Well, I guess let's get into it and see, right? So let's see. In case you guys are wondering what the hell we're talking about today we will be discussing Get Out. This was released in 2017, which I can't believe it's been that long. Since this movie came out, I'm shook.
I can believe that it's 2017. I just can't believe 2017 was so long ago.
It's so far from today, yes. So it was written, co-produced, and directed by Jordan Peele, and it was his directorial debut, which we mentioned this when we were talking about Saw with James Wan and that being his directorial debut, and we were talking about how insane it was the return that they got on that movie. This movie, so it had a $4.5 million budget, and it ended up making $255.4 million at the box office. So good for Jordan Peele, right?
Yes.
Because the profit on this movie
was ignorant.
It was crazy. I don't think that he saw it coming though, because he said that he really, like, originally when he wrote the movie, he started working on the movie like when Obama got elected. And he was like, I always thought that it would just be something for me. But then he pitched it and somebody actually wanted to make it. And he was like, I can't believe it. He's like, I don't even think people want to watch this movie. And how wrong he was.
So wrong.
So wrong. So it is Jordan Peele's first movie. So he's only made 3 thus far. And stellar career thus far. I mean, he really knocks it out of the park. But the movie itself is a standalone movie. So no prequels, sequels, nothing. I did have a little tidbit though. So when the movie came out, it was a smash hit. And so Universal was like, we love smash hits. We adore money. And they were immediately like, sequel, let's talk about it. And Jordan Peele said, quote, of course they have asked about a sequel. It was the first thing they said, let's do a sequel. He goes on to say, honestly, I'm open to it, but I won't do a sequel just for some kind of cash grab. If it's right, if it feels good, and I feel like I can beat the original, that's when I'll do it. So good for him, because I definitely don't want a stupid, watered-down sequel to this movie.
It's such a complete story that all the sequel would be is just a carbon copy of the first one.
I agree.
You know, there's nowhere else to go. I just feel like it's told, it's great. Please just don't.
Well, thank God he owns, the rights to his work, because if it wasn't up for him, Universal would have definitely made a sequel in a heartbeat.
just soul sucking vultures.
Yeah. Him not making a sequel is a good thing too, because I feel like he writes his movies, he puts a lot of thought into them, tons of thought, tons of care. They're very smart. I think that if he was just kind of like forced to just sit down and be like, okay, now do a sequel, something that, if, like something for a cash grab, I just think that one, it would be a waste of his talent, because I feel like if he did a sequel, it would have taken the place of like Us, which you love. That's like your favorite Jordan Peele movie, isn't it? Yeah. So like if we like imagine if we got a shitty sequel instead of Us, and then it would have kind of taken away from his trajectory, right?
Yeah.
It's been smart on his part to make, not only he's done 3 movies so far, but 3 vastly different movies each time. And so I just don't think that he should necessarily waste his time on a sequel just to have a sequel. But yeah, so I have a lot more facts that we'll go over towards the end. I don't want to make the opening too long. Oh, and I guess just a forewarning, I think that this is like exceedingly obvious, but I don't know if people haven't seen this movie. This, very similarly to Candyman and Candyman 2021, it heavily deals with race. So we will be discussing issues that pertain to race. When we say somebody's race, it is of importance because it's integral to the story. So anybody that has any issues with that, maybe this isn't the episode for you. Maybe it's not the movie for you. I think everybody should watch it. But yeah, so just letting you know that we're about to get into that right now. With all that being said, did you want to just jump right into it?
Yes. Right in the suburbs.
So the movie opens with a black man who we will later learn is named Andre, but right now we don't know him. He is walking through a suburban neighborhood. So he's on the phone with presumably a girl that he's meeting in this neighborhood. And while trying to navigate his way to her house, he is telling her that he feels like a sore thumb in this area because it is a really like well manicured, predominantly white neighborhood. So as he's walking, we see this white Porsche drive by and then make a sharp U-turn in the middle of the street to follow Andre closely. Now, the whole time, Andre is talking to himself, and when he sees the Porsche following him, he's like, fuck that. He's like, I'm gone. I'm turning around and going back the way I came, because he says, you know how they like to do motherfuckers out here. Because he is clearly in the wrong neighborhood, right? I believe that's what the residents would say. So as he's going to cross the street to leave the neighborhood, he looks over at the Porsche. It's still running, but now the driver's side door is open and the car is empty. And Andre's like, fuck. And he starts to look around before the camera quickly pans and we see that somebody behind him, dressed all in black, with this all black knight's helmet, they run up behind Andre, put him in a headlock, and hold him until Andre passes out. The person then drags Andre to his Porsche and throws him in the trunk. With the whole time, there's this very upbeat music playing to really like juxtapose the scene. So it's that Run Rabbit song. And then the Porsche drives off and the credits start to roll. And so that was the cold opening.
We love cold openings.
I do. I love a cold opening. Then we cut to Chris Washington's immaculately furnished apartment.
Now that's what we really love.
An immaculately furnished apartment, yes.
And exposed brick.
I love exposed brick. I love exposed pipes. I thought, it's like a studio, but it's so well furnished that you can't even tell it's a studio. Like the shit is giving apartment,
Mm-hmm.
So we're painting Chris's apartment as Childish Gambino's Redbone plays. And we're getting a lot of shots of Chris's photography. on the walls of his apartment because we will learn that Chris is a really, really great photographer, which is very important. Chris is fresh out of the shower and he's shaving, he's getting ready. And then Chris's girlfriend, Rose, shows up. Rose is, of course, white. So she comes in and she's sitting on a sofa playing with his dog, Sid, while Chris is packing for a trip that they're taking together to Rose's family home to spend the weekend. So he's packing, and Rose can sense that something is bothering Chris. And so she goes to talk to him about it. She's asking him what's wrong. And Chris asks her if her family knows that he is Black. And Rose just smiles and says, no, should they? As if this point doesn't matter at all. I guess blissfully oblivious to why this would matter. And so she really laughs at Chris's concerns. And he's just trying to really explain to her, like, okay, well, since I'm the first Black guy that you've ever dated, your parents might be upset. And he says, quote, chase him off the lawn with a shotgun. And Rose assures him that that won't happen. And she says her dad would have voted for Obama a third time if he could have. Which she says she's bringing up because she says that her dad is definitely going to want to talk to Chris about it. And she's like, I know that that's going to suck, but believe me, it's more because he's a lame dad and it has nothing to do with race, kind of thing. Okay. She just assures Chris that her parents are not racist. And she says if they were, she would have told him and she wouldn't be bringing Chris home with her.
So when you watch it, it's one of those scenes where I think for all Black people are just like, you can't be this goddamn naive.
Well, it's so funny that you should say that because I know that it's like you feel like they can't be, but we actually know people that have been in situations like this. It's like you don't believe that your family is racist, but then it's like, how would you know because you've never seen a Black person in your whole life? You know what I mean? Like, well, how would you know? It's like, yeah, I guess your family doesn't fly a Confederate flag in your yard, but that doesn't make them not racist. And so Chris's concerns are valid, and I feel like even if you think that, so like for Rose, even if you think that his concerns don't mean anything, if you feel like you can laugh them off, I don't think that it's fair to dismiss his experience, right? Because Chris is a grown-ass Black man in America.
And he's dark skinned.
That's true, yes. So Chris is played by Daniel Kaluuya, who is phenomenal actor and phenomenal in this role. And so if you know what Daniel Kaluuya looks like, he is dark complexioned. So he's not even like a Drake type, bringing home a Drake type, where it's like you could maybe forget for a few minutes. He is indisputably Black. And so she's able to kind of assuage his worries right now, but they're obviously going to be in the back of Chris's mind because he really has no idea what's about to happen. Additionally, I believe that they're supposed to be like in New York City, right? I don't think they say, but yeah, so I believe that they're in New York City, and I think that Rose's family is supposed to live in upstate New York, so it is a ways away, and it's not important, but we are going to learn this later. Chris doesn't drive, so Rose is going to drive them up there, so that could make for a really awkward situation once they get up there, because it's not like Chris will have the option to just like leave and get on the bus. Right? So he is feeling a little anxious, but Rose just like isn't really getting that. But whatever. So they smile and kiss and they head off on the trip. So next we cut to them in the car, and Rose is driving them, and they're heading down a long road with woods on each side because they're heading up to this like rural area. Chris tries to smoke a cigarette, but Rose takes it, breaks it in half, and throws it out the window. She doesn't want him smoking tobacco, which I was like, that's fair, because I was like, don't smoke in my car. That was mad presumptuous.
He like she ain't put him out. Cause I would put his ass out. Oh hell to no.
And then, it's going to come up in a little bit, but they haven't really been dating that long for you to be that comfortable to just pull out a cigarette in my car, sir. No.
I can't wait till we talk about that because like too soon.
Too soon.
Let them come to the city.
That's Dante. Please, let's keep going so we can get there, because Dante, I thought the same thing, and I was like, am I being too like unreasonable? But okay, let's get there. So that's when Chris decides to call his best friend and super TSA agent, Rod. So Rod is going to be taking care of Sid, Chris's dog, for the weekend while Chris is away. So Rod asks about Rose, and that's when Rose politely demands to talk to Rod, which I was like, that's weird. So Chris puts him on speakerphone so Rose can say hi, and they have a little playful, friendly banter about Rose choosing the wrong guy before Chris takes the phone back. When Chris and Rod are back on the phone, Rod is low-key scolding Chris because he's like, well, you don't take my advice. You're too hard-headed.
Because that's your problem. I know everything and you pretend that I don't. But let me get you together real quick.
But like kind of facts, right? So that is actually that's actually gonna be like a theme floating in the background of this movie, is that you should always listen to your sensible best friend. Rod was like, do not go to that white girl's parents' house.
Flat out.
Just don't do it. Like, that's my advice. And so he's poking fun at Chris before Chris decides to just hang up.
Because you haven't met them. Let's marinate in this for like 2 minutes. Because you haven't met them. So if you already have like, well, do they even know I'm black? Well, then what the hell are you going for? You sound dumb as hell.
Okay, you're going to their house in upstate New York to spend a whole weekend. And you've never even had dinner with these people? Racism aside, what if they are assholes? Like, what if they stink? You don't fucking know. Because, y'all, and we might as well just say it now, Rose and Chris have only been dating for like 4 to 5 months.
It's too soon to be meeting your mama anyway.
That's what I said. I was like, this is moving very, very quickly.
Because if she would have been like, you can meet my parents, I'd be like, why?
First of all. Second of all, come meet my parents at their house for a full weekend?
Can they come to the city and we can eat dinner?
For the first time, like, can we go to a neutral public place for our first meeting? I was like, I would never be in this situation. Just race aside, black, white, like Hispanic, Asian, anybody meeting anybody's family for the first time, even if you were meeting somebody's like fucking friend group for the first time, if you're taking a trip, you do not know at all the people that are going to be there, like, I don't even think that he knows their like full names. Don't go somewhere where you can't leave if something happens, if you are stuck. I hate being in positions like that. I never want to be trapped somewhere. Don't put me in a crazy situation. And that's what Rose is putting Chris in, a very crazy situation. But Chris is doing it. And I was like, Chris, I get it. You really like Rose, but it's been 4 months.
Why though?
Well,
let's keep going.
Let's keep going. I know. Whew. We digress, right? So once they're off the phone, Rose pokes fun at Chris for being jealous of Rod when a deer runs across the road and is hit by Rose's car and flies off into the woods.
This is our first on-screen kill.
Stop. Okay. I hated this. So Rose almost loses control of the car, but she manages to keep it on the road and they get out. So she's checking the damage to her car. But that's when Chris hears this deer's like really distressed crying coming from the woods. So he walks into the tree line and he finds the deer lying on the ground. The deer is dying. It's gonna die in front of him. It's fatally wounded. Huge gash on its side. So Chris is watching it there. It's dying on the side of the road, and he has this really pained expression on his face. So he's really, really bothered by what just happened. So Rose, I assumedly decides to call the police at this time, because I can't imagine that Chris would have called the police for many reasons. Right. We know this because then we cut to her telling the police about the deer, and the police officer being like, next time you need to call animal control, but okay. And so she's talking to the police in the background, and we're just kind of looking at Chris in the foreground. He's leaning on the front of Rose's car, and he's just looking really saddened about what happened to the deer. So the officer asks Rose where they're headed, and she tells the officer that they're headed out to her parents' house for the weekend. And then the cop calls over to Chris asking to see his license. So Chris goes to pull out his ID because he doesn't have a license, like we said. But Rose immediately objects because she's like, Chris was not driving. So why do you need to see his ID? So the cop's like, girl, I didn't ask who was driving. I asked to see his ID. So Chris goes to hand it to the officer because that's what you do in a situation like that. Yeah, he's not in a position to be indignant like Rose is. But Rose stops him, and she says, fuck that. You don't have to give him your ID because you haven't done anything wrong. Which is true.
True?
Legally, that is true. I learned this because I've watched a lot of this YouTube channel. These people on YouTube, they are white. I feel like that has to be said. They're white. And so they go around kind of doing things to kind of almost like instigate the police, but they're not breaking the laws in any way. And so I watch them not necessarily because I agree with what these people stand for, but because I do like that they are kind of showing you what your rights are when it comes to the police. If you have not broken any laws and the police don't have probable cause, so for instance, if they're just kind of standing outside of the police station, like taking pictures of the police station, you are in your right to do that. And the police might come out and they might be like, you can't do that, you need to leave. And then if you're like, no, I don't have to leave because I'm on the public sidewalk and there's no laws against that. If you get into like an argument with them and then they're like, let me see your ID or something, you can refuse that. If they touch you, if they arrest you, they are breaking the law. And that's what these guys do. They kind of goad them to see what they're going to do. And of course, they're filming it. And so I can't tell you how many times the person will be like, get your superior officer. And the superior officer will have to come out, a lot of times recognizing the guys because they do this so often. And the superior officer's like, stop. No, they don't have to. They do not have to do that. They don't have to give you their identification. There is no law saying that they do. You can't just like flex your power on people. So she is right.
Right.
Yes. Now, that works for some people. It should work for everyone. But in the real world, in reality, this does not work for everyone. The law, I don't mean to like shock anybody, but the law is not doled out equally amongst every group of individuals. That's why Chris is immediately like, yes, I will comply. And Rose is like, fuck that, you don't have to. The cop then starts to say that anytime there's an incident, they have every right to ask for IDs, when Rose just cuts him off and she's like, that's bullshit. And she looks at the officer, and the officer doesn't push her on this because, one, he doesn't know who she is, right? Because for all that he knows, her parents could be lawyers and he could get fucked up because it's not a law that you have to do that. So the cop leaves. He tells Rose to make sure that she gets her headlight and mirror fixed from the accident, and he gets in his car and he fucks off. And Chris is like, what?
He was shook as.
He was shook. So in the car, he's like really feeling that, right? Because he's like, Rose stood up for him. And Rose is like, I'm not going to let anyone fuck with my man. And Chris really appreciates that. You know, I get it.
Yeah. That's very nice of you. But next time, just y'all saw Queen and Slim. You had the wrong officer. This could have really went left.
It could have, yes. But that's the thing, right? There's no world that someone like Rose could imagine where things would end that way. Because she's not even thinking that that's a possibility. So when they arrive to Rose's parents' house, they enter the gates of the estate, because that's what it is. And they drive past a black man who's raking. And Rose informs Chris that that's the groundskeeper. And we will learn later that his name is Walter. So then Chris and Rose exit the car and they go to the house where they meet Dean and Missy Armitage. So these are Rose's parents. So Rose's dad, Dean, immediately starts calling Chris like, my man, my man, my man. It's super
I would have
uncomfortable.
left. Oh, this was nice.
I'm getting a lot of cringe from the situation, and it's just like, I don't know. I hate this, but whatever. So they all hug and they head inside, and the camera pulls out and we see the groundskeeper, Walter, is just like standing there staring at this scene. So once inside, Rose and Chris are telling her parents about how they hit a deer on the way and how it really frucked them up. And I was like, y'all are so fucking lame. Rose is like, it really frucked us up. And I'm just like, shut the fuck up.
I would have immediately just been like, I don't like these people. I don't like her around her parents. This is not going to work. This relationship is over. When we get back to the city, this shit's over.
Dante!
Shit's over.
Dante, that's extremely aggressive.
Come on, Ruth.
Because they're like, oh, well, I'm sorry that it really frucked you up.
I'd be like, what? Fruck?
You know, I do know people that don't curse in front of their parents. I know that is a big thing for a lot of people, is a respect thing. I would never say fruck. Like, I didn't curse in front of my grandma, but I would also never say fruck. I would die before I said that.
Because I'm normal.
Because I'm not a freak. So just say something else. Just fucking, you have a large vocabulary. Replace the word. So they're all fucking hokey pokey.
They're weird. Like, you're 4 or 5 months into this. Do you really want to be in this family?
They're kind of like Magooey.
Kinda. They're Magooey. They're Magoo. When her dad walked up to him and was like, my man.
My man.
I'd be like, hell to the no.
You're already bailing on the relationship, right? So you're done.
Yeah.
Let's keep going, and I'll tell you about when I would be bailing on this relationship. So that's when Dean starts. This was weird to me. So that's when Dean starts going on and on and on about how he hates deer and he's happy that they killed one. Because he says that they're like rats and they're taking over and they're ruining the ecosystem, which, like, okay, you're being a fucking psycho rat. Who's this? You don't know anything about Chris and you're coming on very, very strong. This is a very weird thing that you're saying right now.
People build in areas that deer live in.
Well, Missy, Rose's mom, and Rose, they're like, what? Dad, that's crazy. Don't say that. And he's just like, nah. I'd kill them all if I could, basically. And I'm just like, what the hell are we talking about right now?
You don't like black people. I need to get out of here.
Dante, that is so funny because him saying all of that, for some reason in my mind, I was like, you sound like you don't like black people.
Look, it's just what it is. But put me on, get camera 4 on me immediately. You just, as a black person, always have to go. This can go left at any moment. So when I hear that kind of stuff, they're taking over, kill them all. Who's they?
I know. Like, can you be more specific?
Immediately. Like, what? Hold on.
That is so funny that we both had that same thought. I was like, something about this is not, I don't like this. But wait, so then that's when Dean asks Rose and Chris, I I I almost don't even want to say it because I was so fucking like cringed out about it. But he was like, "How long has this thing been going on?" Like talking about fucking Chris and Rose, and it's so fucking awkward. And Chris, it's like I know from being in like very awkward situations similarly to this, I know how Chris is feeling where it's kind of like you just have to sit there and you have this dumb idiot kind of half smile on your face because you're like, I just need to get through this conversation because it's not something that you can like snap about, right? It's like microaggressions. So it's like if you just snap, then it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't even mean it like that. And so it's like this thing is happening. And Chris is just kind of sitting there looking like, ugh. So he says that it's been 4 months. Rose corrects him and said it's been 5 months. And Dean is just coming on way too fucking strong. It's a lot. I was turned off by Dean very early.
When you say it out loud, that don't sound like a short time. 5 months is not. I just can't get over
Wait,
that.
he said 4 months. She corrected him and said 5 months. Like, bitch, what does it matter?
And that's like I forgot that
Like a
they
real couple?
right. So y'all sound crazy.
No, it's crazy. 5 months is insane. That's not even like a school year. Like, we haven't even made it to like spring break. But yeah, so all of this is happening, and Chris just kind of has to like laugh his way through it. It's super awkward. But that's when Dean says that he's going to take Chris on a tour of the house. And I thought that this was like an awkward exchange because they've been driving for a while, and I think Missy and Rose are like, "Oh, but they've been driving, they want to like unpack, like rest a minute." And Dean's like, "Unpack before the tour?" No. That was kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just getting like weird vibes from him. But, Chris, of course, he doesn't want to ruffle anyone's feathers, so he goes on the tour of the house. When they're walking around, they see Missy's office, and we learn that she's a psychiatrist, and this is where she sees her patients. They look at some pictures of Rose and her family that are hanging on the wall, and that includes her brother Jeremy, who is apparently studying medicine, just like Dean. Dean also shows Chris some items he's collected while traveling internationally. And he tells Chris about how it is such a privilege to experience someone else's culture. So that's when Dean shows Chris a picture of his father. So this is Rose's grandfather, Roman Armitage, who he says was almost in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, but he was beat out by Jesse Owens. And he laughs and jokingly says that his dad almost got over it. So, for anyone that doesn't know, because this is an important fact, so Jesse Owens was a black runner. So he did track and field. And he was in the 1936 Summer Olympics. So this was in Nazi controlled Germany at the time. So it was in Berlin. And he gained international fame during this time because he actually won 4 gold medals. So he was actually the most successful athlete at the games, and he was a black man. So it was a huge deal because at the time Hitler was really trying to push the Aryan supremacy, and so he was very much sure that Germans would like blow it out of the water at the Olympics and everything. And so people were really, really feeding into that at the time. And then Jesse Owens came and shit on everybody, and he's black. And so it just kind of, people credit it with like single handedly crushing Hitler's myth about this Aryan supremacy. So, as they move on with the tour, Dean points out the door to the basement, and he says they had to seal it up because there's black mold down there, so we don't get to see that area.
What kind of mold?
Black mold.
Everything. Huh?
Why the mold gotta be black?
They put my black ass out. They'd be like, he is awful.
It'd be like, Chris, I'm scared. I don't understand what's wrong with you. So, can't get down there. Too much black mold. So that's when they head to the kitchen. Now, as they're... That's so stupid.
My shit would be packed. They'd be like, go home.
Thank you for stopping by. So, as they head to the kitchen, they enter, and Dean is in the middle of saying that his mother loved her kitchen, so they've kept a piece of her in there. And it's funny because in that moment when they walk in, we and Chris see there's a black woman in a 1952 wig standing in the center of the kitchen. And we're going to learn that this is Georgina. So she is like a maid. Dean doesn't acknowledge this. You know, he's just like, oh, Chris, that's Georgina. Georgina, this is Chris. And they're like, hi, you know, but Chris clocks it. So he's kind of taken aback by the sight because we've already seen Walter, the black groundskeeper, and now they have this black maid inside in this fucking, I don't know, Mama's Family wig. So it's a little off-putting.
Is it off-putting because she's giving you deaconess realness?
It's in that wig. It's such a wig. It's so wiggy.
That she's giving you vacation Bible school?
She's giving Barbara, this is Shirley as a wig. It's something about it is just off because it's like she's not an old woman.
Right.
So why is she wearing this wig? And I'm not trying to shit on the wig too much, y'all, because I know that some of y'all's grandma's moms probably has a wig like this. I know that mine did.
But this is not a grandma though.
No, and that's the thing. That's what's making it kind of weird because she seems out of time.
Because she got that stiff hair.
It's stiff wear, bitch. There, it's sitting on her head like a fucking hockey puck. I don't know, but Dean doesn't miss a beat. He just continues with the tour. He takes Chris to the backyard, which is huge because, like I said, it's like in the state. So it also has a lake back there, and he notes that there's total privacy as the nearest house is like way across the lake. And that's when Chris spots Walter again. He's standing there just like raking. But he's also really intensely staring at Chris as he walks by, so it's giving very weird vibes. But Dean then tells Chris he knows what he's thinking. He's like a white family with black servants. He understands that the optics of the whole thing are pretty suspect. Dean explains this by saying that he hired Walter and Georgina to help care for his parents before they died. And then when his parents did die, he says he couldn't bear to let them go. That's when Dean slips in, by the way, I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could have. And Chris just smiles and keeps it moving. Next, we cut to the family sitting down at a table outside to have lunch. Dean asks Chris what his parents do, and Chris tells Dean that his father was not in the picture, and his mother died when he was 11 as a result of a hit-and-run accident. Rose's parents apologize, and Missy, Rose's mom, tells Chris they don't have to talk about that as she taps her spoon on the side of her glass of iced tea to dry it off. Chris notices that, and he's getting really fidgety. He's tapping his knuckles on the table. And Dean asks him, do you smoke? Because you're pretty fidgety over there. You seem like you're jonesing for a cigarette. And Chris is like, yes, I do smoke, but I am trying to quit. And Dean tells him that it's a nasty habit. That's when Dean suggests that Chris let Missy fix the issue because she, as a psychiatrist, has developed a way to get people to stop smoking by using hypnosis. Rose interjects that not everyone wants strangers messing around in their heads, but Dean is kind of insistent, saying that he was a smoker for 15 years and that Missy put him under once and he hasn't had a cigarette since. And this is weird. This is a weird thing to do. It's weird to be insistent about allowing someone to hypnotize you. Dean has been coming on too strong since Chris got here. Dean is having a hard time reading the room, but Missy is sensing that Chris is like a little bit uncomfortable, and so she tells Dean to ease up a bit, and Chris just tells them, I'm good. I don't need it. So that's when Dean acquiesces and tells Chris, smoker or not, he's happy that Chris is there that weekend for the big party.
What?
Okay, Chris is completely in the dark right now.
We would have broke up.
Dante, this is...
Okay, I'm sorry. Keep going. I'm sorry.
First of all, Dante, if it was up to you, we all would have broken up before you crossed the threshold of the door. But I don't like this.
Because why the fuck would you do this to me?
Well, Chris is like, what are you talking about? A party? And Rose says that she was completely unaware that it was this weekend. And her mom's like, well, Rose, it's the same day every year. And so if I was Chris, I would be upset.
When I say livid, that's what I was saying earlier. When he was like, why you going up there? You don't know who's going to show up.
Right. And you have no way of leaving.
I hate shit like that.
This is what I mean. Don't ever go somewhere where you can't just like leave when things start to get crazy, because this is crazy to me. So while Georgina is refilling everyone's tea, Dean tells Chris that the party is one that his father Roman used to throw every year. It's a get-together with all of his friends where they hang out and they play games. Missy says that they kept it up as a way to keep Dean's parents close to them. So at this point, Georgina has gotten to Chris's glass and she's starting to refill it. And we can see on her face that something is not right. So she really appears to be in some sort of quiet distress. She's staring off into the distance, and it just seems like she's struggling internally with something. And so then she accidentally overfills Chris's glass, and that causes her to kind of snap back, and she apologizes. But that's when Missy tells her to just go lie down and get some rest. And there's a bit of a pause as Georgina looks at Missy before just smiling and saying that she agrees she is going to go lie down. But before they have the opportunity to talk about any of that, Jeremy, Rose's brother, appears. It turns out he is also visiting that weekend for the party. And this would have pissed me off. This would have pissed me off.
Because you didn't forget all that. That seemed like a setup, right?
Yes. Yes. You didn't know that there was a party and you didn't know that your brother was going to be here?
Horror movie aside, you doing too much, girl. It's 5 months in. I'm already here having to meet your parents. And now I'm meeting your brother and they having a goddamn annual party? That's not cool. What the fuck?
No, I agree. It's not cool. The type of person that I am, I would have been in a really foul mood at this point, finding this out. And I might be able to buy that maybe she didn't know the party was that weekend, although I would have a little bit of a hard time believing that because you told your parents that we were coming, and at no point were your parents like, oh, good, you'll be here for the party. You know what I mean?
Right.
But then you also didn't know your brother was going to be here. That doesn't seem likely to me.
This seems like if this wasn't a horror movie and this was like a romantic comedy, her ex would have been at the party and she's trying to make him jealous or something. You know?
Yeah. It is giving those vibes. But then we cut to that night, and the family and Chris, they're sitting down, they're having dinner, and Jeremy is telling Chris some really embarrassing stories about Rose, including how she used to suck on her toenail clippings and keep them in a jewelry box. And I was like, bro, what the fuck are we talking about right now?
That's so nasty.
How long ago? He also starts telling this like very crazy story about when they had a party at the house when they were younger and they were drinking and he was hooking up with a girl and she bit a guy, and it's just like it's all very it's a lot. It's very weird table discussion, but when Missy leaves, she goes to get dessert and she tells Dean to kind of move the conversation to a cleaner direction. So Dean is trying to ask Chris about what kind of sports he likes, and Chris answers basketball, and then Jeremy interjects and asks if he likes MMA. Now, at this point, Rose is trying to get Jeremy to stop talking, and Dean is telling Jeremy to let somebody else have the floor. When Jeremy gets really serious and tells Dean that Chris is dating his sister, so he wants to get to know him. And Dean seems really annoyed by this, and it's really turning the mood in the room sour because Jeremy is, it's like kind of under the surface, but like not really well hidden, like hostility in the room. But Chris is trying to keep it cordial. So Chris does answer the question, and he says that he doesn't watch anything like UFC. So that's when Jeremy asks if Chris ever got into street fights as a kid. And Chris just says that he took judo lessons when he was in like the first grade, you know, just really trying to keep it light. Rose and Dean kind of giggle at the image, but Jeremy is not letting up. And he tells Chris that with his body and his genetic makeup, if he really trained, like no pussyfooting around, he would be a fucking beast. And he's just like coming on really, really strong. And Rose is looking a little annoyed. And Chris is just at this point just sitting there smiling, just like looking at him because it's kind of crazy. But that's when Missy comes back in with carrot cake and she kind of breaks the tension for a second. But Jeremy tells Chris that the good thing about jujitsu, which I guess is what he practices, is that strength doesn't matter. It's all about the mind, a strategic game of chess. And Chris is just like, okay, that's cool. But that's when Jeremy jumps up. He tells Chris to stand up and he walks over and he starts trying to grab Chris. And I was like, this is crazy. He is trying to grab Chris, and Chris is like, I have a rule that I don't play fight with drunks. And Jeremy tries to continue until Missy ends up telling him to stop, which he does. And he says he wasn't going to hurt him. And then he takes a bottle of wine and walks off. And everyone is very, very uncomfortable. I don't believe that if I was Chris, I really don't think that I would have stayed.
Like, I don't know you. That's my purse. I don't know you.
Yeah.
And we grown. What you want to, like, wrestle? Like, this ain't no frat house? Like, what you doing, weirdo?
Right. This is strange behavior.
Your mom is serving carrot cake. We're eating carrot cake right now.
And you want to wrestle me in the dining room? And then he's being too aggressive about it to make it feel lighthearted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And it's not fun when I gotta repeat myself. If I told you I didn't want to do it, then chill out.
Yes. So when we cut to Rose's room and Rose and Chris are getting ready for bed, Chris is sitting on his laptop just kind of listening to Rose rant about her family, about how her brother was going to put Chris in a headlock, which he's never done with any of her other boyfriends, and how crazy it is that her dad has never said "my man" before in his life, but now all of a sudden everything is just like "my man, my man." And even about how Missy was like really rude to Georgina at lunch over, which is apparently something she has never done. All this like new behavior, and she's just like, what could it be? And Chris is just like, sounds about right. But he has a look on his face that he is just like obviously not at all surprised by any of this. Rose, sit your ass down. Girl, I told you what it was before we came here.
Stop being so damn stupid.
Well, that's when Rose says that they're no different from that cop earlier, and that really sucks. So when Rose pushes Chris, Chris tells Rose, I told you so. He's like, I didn't want to say it, but Rose, girl. And Rose apologizes for bringing him there and for being related to them. But they embrace, and he tells her that she doesn't have anything to be sorry about. She should not be sorry. Because he just really is head over heels for Rose. I would have left. You're recapping every crazy thing that's happened, and it's literally been one afternoon. I'm uncomfortable. Your brother put his hands on me.
And we killed a deer.
And the deer died on the way. The mood has been fucked up since the beginning. But when she asks Chris how he can be so calm, he tells her that honestly, this is nothing. Because it's one of those situations where it's like, yes, compared to like overt racism, this isn't anything. And that's the thing. It's like these tiny little things. And it's like for any one thing, you don't want to like blow up over it because it just all seems like so small. But it's obviously it's a pattern of behavior that's starting, right? And Chris is just kind of dealing with it, kind of just like letting it go, but it's just going to keep getting worse.
You know what else I don't like? He didn't ever confront her about, you really didn't know that party was happening.
No, he didn't. He didn't. And
I didn't like that.
or that her brother was going to be there. I don't know. Chris is very nice. Like he's very go with the flow. And I can't relate.
I'm the current.
But he does appreciate that she's worked up for him. Same deal as with the cop. He likes that she has his back. They kiss, and she tells him that the people coming for the party tomorrow are so white. And they laugh about it because things are going to get rough. And so they, I guess, have sex. I don't know. But then we cut to later that night. Rose is sleeping, but Chris is lying awake, and he's thinking about the deer that they hit earlier that day. He can't sleep. It's kind of haunting him. So he sits up and he is going to go outside to like sneak a cigarette. And he notices there's a small closet door that's open in Rose's room. And he just kind of looks at it and then dismisses it. He walks through the house thinking that everyone is asleep, but he doesn't notice that Georgina is walking around. And we get a little jump scare when we as the audience see her. But then Chris goes outside, and he's standing outside for just a minute when he notices Walter, the groundskeeper, come full on sprinting right at him. And it seems like he's going to barrel straight into him, and it isn't until the last second that he quickly turns, takes a sharp turn, and just keeps running the other way. And Chris is like, obviously startled, but obviously this is very fucking strange. And so he turns towards the house, and he's startled again when he sees Georgina is standing there in the window of the back door. And she looks like she's looking out, but when we cut to inside with her, we see that she has a light on inside, so she can't actually see outside. She's looking at her reflection in the glass and just really deeply admiring her face, just kind of rubbing on it before she walks off and turns off the light. And so Chris is like,
I gotta go.
Right. Well, he's weirded out, but on his way back to his room, Chris is trying to sneak back through the house when he walks past Missy's office, not knowing that she is awake and sitting in there. And she asks him if he knows how dangerous smoking is, which startles him. But she then asks Chris to come into her office and sit with her for a little while. So Chris goes in and he sits across from Missy. So she's in her chair, he's in another chair, sitting kind of facing each other. And she pours herself a cup of tea and she's stirring it. And she asks him if he wants to know how the hypnosis works. And Chris laughs, suggesting that she just dangles a pocket watch in front of people's faces. And Missy laughs and she explains exactly how it works, what goes on. And then she asks Chris if he smokes in front of her daughter. And she really scolds him for putting her daughter in danger for smoking in front of her. Chris promises that he will quit, and Missy changes the subject to now start talking about Chris's mother. So she asks Chris where he was when his mother died. The whole time, she's just like sitting there, just very nonchalant, rhythmically stirring her tea. And Chris says that he doesn't want to think about that, but Missy doesn't say anything. She's just sitting there stirring her tea. So then Chris answers her, and he says that he was at home. He was watching TV. So Missy asks him, what did he hear during that time? What is the sound of that memory? Is it the TV? And Chris responds, no, that it was the rain. He can hear the rain. It was raining that night. So she tells Chris to really focus on that sound, focus on the rain until he can find it, hear it, which he does, and we can hear it too. This whole scene is extremely well done, but I am extremely disappointed in Chris.
I don't want to talk about my mother's death. I don't even know you. Okay, I'm going to bed. It was nice talking to you. Good night.
So that's the thing. He actually has a moment before they like really get into it where she's talking to him because the things that she's asking him are strange. And so he's like, is this, kind of suggesting like, are you hypnotizing me right now? Like, is that what you're trying to do? But I have to assume that he doesn't believe that she can.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, and then it just happens so subtly that he doesn't realize that he's crossing a precipice until it's too
Too
late.
late. For me, it's just like he's just too eager to please because asking me on our first meet about where I was when my mother died is so absurd.
It's, in my opinion, especially absurd considering the night that we've had. I'm already I would be, apparently Chris isn't, but I would already be kind of on guard around these people because the entire day has been very strange. And now you're asking me this. Realistically, I don't even know how much he really got to know them because I'm sure that after the brother tried to put him in a chokehold.
Didn't eat the carrot cake.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I seriously doubt that they sat there and had a hearty discussion over dessert. So I had to think that kind of killed the mood, and the mood had already been kind of crazy all day. And so then it's like we're talking about smoking, and then she's like, where were you when your mom died? I think that's really bizarre, and I don't know at this point like when he would have been able to get up and walk away. I don't know like when it happens, but I think a lot of what's happening is Chris is really eager to please these people, and I don't like it. I'm frustrated about it. So Chris starts to visualize that night, and he's clearly uncomfortable with remembering this, and so he's really struggling. He's starting to tear up because obviously this is something that's very painful, and it's obviously something that he doesn't want to remember. On a trip, his first time meeting his girlfriend's parents, but he tries to pull away, tries to not focus on it, but Missy makes him focus on her again. And she's just sitting there, just like continuously stirring and scraping her teacup with her spoon. He tells her that his mom was coming home from work and it was very late, and it just kept getting later, and she just never made it back. And he says that he knew that something was wrong, but he didn't do anything. He didn't call anyone. He just sat there in his room watching TV. And Missy really latches on to that fact. And it's at this point that Chris's eyes have totally welled up with tears and he's starting to cry. But Daniel Kaluuya plays this scene, I mean, extremely well. Like, this is like a real masterclass in acting, like the whole like crying thing, because he is crying, yes, but it's not like he wants to. It's just happening. It's just like his body's reacting to it because he's still trying to make his responses sound light, and he is not in his voice portraying that he's very upset right now, because he is talking to his girlfriend's mom, but it's all over his face because his eyes are just running over with tears. They're pouring down his face. So Missy asks him, why didn't you call anyone? And Chris just says that he was scared because remember, he was 11 years old. He thought that if he called anyone, it would just make it real. So now at this point, Chris is really, really struggling. He is really remembering the sensation that he had when he was a kid of just like sitting there nervously scratching his bedpost, waiting for his mom to come and she's never showing up, which the camera keeps cutting back to. So we're getting these small glimpses of that time, Chris sitting on his bed, compared to now where he is kind of reliving that and he's scratching at the arms of the chairs that he's sitting in Missy's office. And you can tell by his face that Chris is really in distress now. And he is, at this point, crying in earnest. So it's now that Chris realizes he cannot move. And he asks Missy why. And she's so calm because she knows exactly what's happening. She's in control of this situation, right? She just tells him that he's paralyzed. Just like the day that he did nothing for his mother. And Chris is really trying hard to fight it, but he can't. And that's when Missy tells Chris to sink into the floor. And Chris tries to plead with her, like, don't, wait. But she just says sink. And he does. So, and we get this clip of the child Chris kind of sinking into his bed as adult Chris sinks as well. And it's such great imagery. This portion of the movie is, again, shot just so well. The cinematography is amazing because Chris, in his chair, he just kind of stiffens from what we can see. We also see that somewhere inside of Chris, we're watching Chris as he slowly falls back, sinks into this black void, and he's desperately trying to claw his way back up to his place in Missy's office, but he can't do it. He's just slowly sinking to the bottom of this void. And it's like he can see through his eyes, but what he's seeing, it's so far away. It's like he's watching what's happening in front of him through a tiny TV set 100 feet away. And so once he reaches kind of the bottom portion of this black pit, we cut back to Chris's body and he's still in the chair in Missy's office and he's sitting there, eyes huge, vacant, unblinking. And there's just like an emptiness to him. The tears are still pouring out of them, but Chris is just not there. So his face covered in tears, Missy comes over and she kneels in front of him. And as Chris is watching through this small window inside of this void, Missy tells him that now he is in the sunken place. And she closes his eyes, leaving Chris totally in the dark, in the bottom of this void. And he is trying hard, desperately to scream into the void, but nothing is coming out. He's not making any sound. His body isn't even reacting from what we can see in Missy's office. Amazing scene. That's when Chris jolts awake. It's the next morning, and it was apparently all just a really bad dream. So Chris kind of shakes it off, and he hears his phone beep. He looks over and notices that it's been unplugged. So he plugs it back in, and he sees that he got a message from Rod just saying everything's been going well with his dog. So then we cut to Chris, who has taken his camera out into the woods to get some alone time and shoot some photos. But on his way back to the house, he notices Georgia in her room upstairs. And again, she's staring at herself in a mirror and just kind of rubbing her face. And Chris picks up his camera lens to like look at her to get a closer look, and he sees her lifting up her 1954 style wig off of her head. But she spots him, turns quickly to look at him, so he quickly looks away. And that's when he decides to go over and talk to Walter, the groundskeeper, who is chopping wood. So Chris tries to talk to Walter like normal, saying something like, they're working you good out here, huh? But Walter doesn't sound the way I think that Chris was expecting him to sound. And Walter hits him with a, well, nothing that I don't want to be doing. Real Magoo response. And the smile that he has on his face along with it is unsettling.
Excruciating.
That's a really good way of describing it. That's how they always look, these two. So I think Chris was like, okay,
It's just us.
yeah, like you don't have to be doing this right now. But Chris then introduces himself, and Walter is like, I know who you are. And then with this creepy smile, he starts talking about how lovely Rose is, and he's like, she's a real goddamn keeper, isn't she? And he's laughing, and Chris is like,
She alright.
this is really strange. He's like, right, yeah, sure, whatever you say, buddy. But Walter then apologizes for scaring Chris the night before with his exercise. And he then asks Chris if it worked. And Chris is like, what? What are you talking about? And Walter notes how Chris was in Missy's office for quite some time last night, which puts Chris on edge because I think that Chris had convinced himself that it was a dream, or at least he really wanted to believe that it was a dream. And Chris says that maybe he had a bit too much wine because he really doesn't remember. So that's when Walter creepily says that he should go back to work and mind his own business, which is the blackest thing that Walter says throughout this entire film. Because let me go mind my business.
Let me shut my fat ass up.
So what did you do?
I shut my fat ass up. You shut up and you let him abuse your daughter.
We can't have that in multiple episodes. And we just enacted this like exact same scene in Saw.
God damn it! It's the best thing that we've ever seen.
It is. But yeah, so for anybody that doesn't know, that's from Precious, which is not a comedy. And I'm ashamed that we treat it as such, but it's from Precious. So when Chris gets back to Rose's room, he expresses his concern about her mom hypnotizing him because that's
disrespectful.
Dante, that's not even the right word for it. That's so fucking egregious. Like, that is
Frucked up.
That's frucked up. Wait, but then Rose is just kind of like, oh, I'm sorry. No, Rose.
No, Chris.
No, Chris.
Because I would have been like, so you knew about that party, huh?
Dante, the girl said she didn't know.
She lied.
No, she did lie. I think she lied. So, in addition to the mom hypnotizing him thing, which I think y'all glossed over it way too quickly, that deserved a very long conversation because at this point, realistically, Rose, I don't think that I could be with you anymore. Because what your mom did was beyond disrespectful, and I don't want to even potentially be in a family where, on a whim, because your mom doesn't like a certain behavior that I exhibit, that she's going to hypnotize me.
Your mother hypnotized me. Your brother wants to fight me. Your dad is just unpleasant to be around because he's weird. Like, you too much. And I gotta meet all your old ass friends and family members at a party that you just forgot about out of all the weekends to come up here. Nah.
But Chris doesn't say any of that. It's like, Chris,
this is weird.
Stand up. Stand up.
Stand up for yourself. That's strange. That's so inappropriate. Why are you being like this? For somebody you only met 5 months ago?
4 months, maybe 5.
That's crazy.
Well, they move beyond the hypnosis thing, and then he brings up his concerns about Walter, who he says has a whole hostile vibe. And Rose isn't taking any of this seriously. And she's joking about it. And that's so fucking frustrating. That is so frustrating. Because what your mom did was absolutely insane. And I'm telling you that Walter is being hostile towards me. And you don't give a fuck. This is not the foundation for a real relationship. Like, am I being too harsh?
No, we're not being harsh enough.
Thank you. Thank you. That's why we're friends.
It's like all these red flags that he's missing in the beginning of a relationship, horror movie or not. This is not the kind of girl you want to be with because she doesn't respect you as an individual person.
Yes. Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself because like it all if this was a horror elements aside, if this was just like a fucking rom-com, Rose has thus far really not taken any of your concerns seriously, even after all of the strange behavior that her family has exhibited. I would think that she would be a little bit more inclined to at least just like listen to you, but she's like laughing about it, joking about it. But they don't really have time to get into it too much because that's when the party guests start to pull up in a line of black cars. And oddly enough, something to think about, Walter, the groundskeeper, is the one greeting them. And as he's opening the doors, letting them out of the cars, they're all shaking his hands, embracing him, hugging him. That's weird. So at the party, all these people are old, but they seem nice enough, okay, on the surface.
Palatable.
It's a very saccharine sweet type of nice what they're being. So they're walking around and they meet one couple, and the husband used to be a golfer. So he makes it a point to tell Chris how much he loves Tiger Woods. He's the best. He then asks to see Chris's golf form, and Chris is like, okay, it's okay. Not mean, but that's weird, right? You wouldn't say that to somebody else. So, okay. They move on. We cut to another couple. It's a woman and her husband who's in a wheelchair with a damn oxygen tank at death's door. Y'all shouldn't even be at this party. But the wife is talking about how handsome Chris is and even comes over to feel on his muscles. And she even asks if it's true that black men are better in bed, essentially. It's such a weird thing. And Rose is also thinking that this is really weird.
And more than being weird, they're being inappropriate. And these are just questions that are just inappropriate.
I know. Well, wait. So then they get to another couple. And the guy is going on and on about fair skin was popular for the past couple hundred years, but now black is in fashion again. It's really hot right now. And by this point, Rose and Chris are very much exhausted by the conversation. I mean, they're just kind of what can you even say to that, right? What the fuck are we talking about right now? So at this point, Chris just kind of excuses himself for a minute. So he's going to go off, take some photos. He's looking around at everyone and he's actively ignoring urges by Dean to come talk to a group of people because I can only imagine what that was going to be like. But that's when he spots another black guy at the party. When he walks up to him, he taps him on the shoulder and he says, "It's good to see another brother around here." But when the man turns around, we see, as the audience, that it's Andre. It's the man that was abducted at the beginning of the movie. Except he's a little different now. Because we saw Andre in the beginning, we know what he sounds like. We know how he dressed. This Andre is not that Andre. So this Andre is wearing like corny as hell. Corny as hell.
At first, I wanted to say he was wearing, at least J. Crew discount, but he was really giving me Eddie Bauer.
Dante, it probably was Eddie Bauer. And then he's wearing like this fucking circle brim. Like, I'm sure there's a name for it. It's giving
Gilligan.
Yes, it's like a straw hat, and then he's speaking really differently. He's like, "Hey, buddy." It's infinitely more Magoo than what we as the audience know that Andre is supposed to be like, because we've seen him before. Now, Chris doesn't appear to know this man. So he doesn't know that this man is acting very strange. But he is really turned off by the guy who is coming on as Magoo. And at this point, Chris is really exhausted by it because Walter and Georgina are also Magoo, and he's in a sea of other Magoo ass white people. So he's not getting any reprieve from that here. So Andre introduces himself as Logan, and that's when Logan's partner, Philomena, walks over.
Philomena have to be a citizen of Mesopotamia. Knew Jesus personally.
Well, we're saying comparatively, right? Because remember, everybody at the party is old, but there's one guy that is like the crypt keeper rolling around here. So Philomena is older, but she's not like Methuselah old. She's just old. So Philomena is a larger, older white woman, which is important because Logan is played by Lakeith Stanfield. So if you don't know who that is, look him up. He's in like Sorry to Bother You.
Atlanta.
He's on Atlanta. The Keith Stanfield is
Skinny.
very slim. Yeah, he's a real slim dude. And Philomena, they're an oddball couple. They just kind of look mismatched, you know?
Mismatch!
Exactly. They just kind of don't fucking fit. They're exactly the kind of couple that you would scream that out to. So Chris is kind of taken aback by this. Logan then tells Philomena about how Chris was saying he was much more comfortable with Logan being there. And Chris is looking at Logan with utter disgust.
Because who raised you? For real, like...
Right!
Come on.
What the hell is your problem? You don't know how to act in a social setting? Like, what the fuck? So, when Logan and Philomena are walking away, Chris is already, like, he's like, something's off about this dude. He's like, something's wrong here. So he holds out his fist to Logan, but Logan grabs it and shakes it like a hand. So Chris is like, that tells me all I need to know. He then watches the couple walk over to another group, and he watches Logan kind of doing a twirl around while the group claps. And Chris is like, what the fuck is going on right now? So Chris wanders away from everybody, and he ends up walking over to a quiet area where there's a man sitting. The man introduces himself as Jim Hudson, and he calls the rest of the group ignorant for how they were treating Chris, and he tells him they have no idea what real people go through. And Chris is really ready to write him off too, because how the fuck do you know what I'm going through? Like, you're a white man, you know? Like, you're not gonna relate to me. But when Chris introduces himself, Jim Hudson says he already knows who Chris is because he is a big fan of Chris's photography. He tells Chris that he has a great eye. That's when Chris recognizes the name Jim Hudson, owner of Hudson Galleries. So he asked Jim essentially, like, how could you become an art dealer even though you're blind? And Jim explains that his assistant describes the pieces to him in great detail. He tells Chris that he thinks that Chris's work is special, powerful. And he tells Chris that he was also a photographer when he was younger, and he photographed mostly wilderness. And he submitted his work to National Geographic 14 times before finally realizing that he just didn't have the eye for art. So that's when he decided to quit and become an art dealer instead. And then he went blind due to a genetic disease. He is in total darkness now. So he and Chris kind of lament over how life just isn't fair. And then Chris walks back to the house, and there's this very eerie scene, and I thought that it was very well done. Chris walks through this house full of people, chatting it up because it's a party. But as soon as Chris walks upstairs, they all abruptly stop talking and they just look upstairs, kind of listening for what Chris is doing. When Chris gets back to Rose's room, he notices that his cell phone is unplugged yet again, but this time it's completely dead. This is such a red flag.
This movie's not in a time frame where that wouldn't be weird. You didn't bring that up to nobody. Like, who keep unplugging my damn phone? Am I rude? I'm aggressive.
Aggressive.
Very, always have been.
Yes. Well, this is my thing. I don't know. I feel like after I noticed that it had happened, I would have taken my phone somewhere else and plugged it in. Just kind of some self-preservation, you know? Because this is strange. And now your phone is completely dead.
Because everybody has a cell phone, so they know, like, oh, I'm plugging it back up.
Yes.
It's malicious intent.
Yes. So he ends up calling Rose into her room to tell her that Georgina unplugged his phone, and he thinks that she did it because she might have a problem with them being together. It is a thing. But Rose, once again, I'm so fucking frustrated. I'm mad at Rose. Just, it is what it is. But I'm really mad at Chris for accepting what's happening right now. Because, once again, Rose isn't taking what he's saying seriously.
You gotta take me serious, for real.
Yes, I'm really voicing a concern to you. She laughs about it. And she says, so because you're so sexy, people are just intentionally unplugging your phone. So Chris is like, all right, bet. Just forget it. It's fine. And she gets upset and storms out. And I was like, y'all have only been dating for 5 months and y'all are having arguments. Like, this is very crazy, Chris. Come on now.
Why you like her?
Right. Because this weekend, she's giving me a million reasons not to like her.
As a person, I wouldn't even want to have to share a cubicle with her.
Mm-mm.
I don't want her to work in a department.
I don't know. We don't know what kind of behavior she was exhibiting before. Maybe she's just really comfortable because she's at her parents' house. But I am definitely turned off by Rose not taking him fucking seriously. She didn't take him seriously before they came here.
That's the thing. That's why I keep asking. I'm like, we don't get to see in the movie why you like her so much. But you in here letting her brother whip your ass and her mama hypnotize you.
At the dinner table.
At the dinner table. You didn't even get the carrot cake.
I was going to say the same thing. You didn't even get to enjoy carrot cake because her brother was coming over trying to fucking put you in a headlock. And you're still here.
Real talk, we would have saved that carrot cake.
Dante, yes, I probably would have eaten seconds. But still, it's the principle.
It's a principle. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so Rose leaves, and Chris calls Rod to tell him just how weird all of this has been, because it's all been very weird, and he really needs to talk to another black person. So he then tells Rod that he got hypnotized, and Rod, like me, is out fucking done. Because, boy, what the fuck are you talking about right now?
You sound absolutely ridiculous.
Dante, be for real.
I know you fucking lying. I know you fucking lying. I know you didn't let them do that to you. That's insane.
But wait, this made me mad as hell. I was heated. Because you're on the phone with your friend now, right? Being open, honest. What do you have to lie for? I was like, does Chris really fucking feel this way? He downplays it. He's saying, well, Rose's mom is a psychiatrist, so it's cool. And it was just to get me to quit smoking. And Rod is like...
You lucky I'm not next to you. I'm going to smack you in your damn face.
Oh, he's like, I don't give a fuck if she is Ayanna Van Zandt. Don't fucking get in my head. Don't hypnotize me. This is... Chris, I don't think this should have to be explained. What the fuck are we talking about right now?
It's not sexual assault, but it's so violating.
I don't know what it is, but I know that a doctor can't just perform something on you because they feel like they should. And she is supposed to be a psychiatrist, so she has to be registered somewhere. So she has to know that, you know? So there would be repercussions if she did it to somebody that had a fucking backbone. But I feel like Rod cannot believe, he cannot fathom that Chris is just okay with any of this. He's like, what if they make you like a sex slave? Like, that's a thing. Like, that's a thing not even just to black people. People get trafficked all the time.
You don't know this girl.
No, you don't. You don't know her. You don't know her parents, and you're in the middle of nowhere. And I'm frustrated because with these two right now, with everything that's happening, you didn't send him your location. And then Rod, you didn't ask for his location. So I'm frustrated with y'all too in that regard because this is very strange behavior.
Tell me where you at right now. I'm on my way.
Right. But that's when Chris says that even the black people out here are really strange. He says that it's like they all miss the movement or something. And Rod says it's probably because they're hypnotized. But Chris is just like not taking any of that seriously. And I'm like, Chris, why not? The hypnosis that you underwent was actually really traumatic. No? Like, yeah, you're not smoking anymore. And yeah, she's a psychiatrist, but what she did was very crazy.
And you think it was a dream that she was asking you about your mama dying? But you should have cussed her ass out this. Because I would have cussed her out so bad, she would have called a cab for me. Do you not understand? They would have been like, you gotta go.
I'm calling the police.
Call them. Call them right now.
Hey, give me this damn carrot cake.
When we arrived, the suspect was outside eating cake.
In my opinion, I don't know, anything would have to me is better than staying here. Like I would have definitely worn out my fucking welcome because it's just so egregious at this point. It's all so crazy, but
Here we are.
Here we are.
This stupid ass boy.
So let's keep going. Chris is not taking anything that Rod is saying seriously. And Rod is like, look, I'm just connecting the dots that you are laying out for me. Chris hangs up on him because he's like done with the conversation. But he does it just as Georgina is entering the room to, I guess, apologize for touching his belongings. So this is the explanation that she gives, okay? Tell me how crazy this sounds. She says that she lifted his phone to clean the dresser and the charger came out, and instead of meddling with it any further, she just left it that way. Bitch, that's the best you could come up with? That sounds insane.
That's when we leave. I would have had a nasty attitude with her, too.
I know that he probably is like, well...
She an old lady, but you're not an old lady. You just got an old-ass wig. So busted-ass wig.
That's the thing. She's not old. She
old
just
lady.
has a grandmother's wig. Georgina's mad weird because while she's saying this to him, the whole time, this grin that she has on her face is
disingenuous.
I mean, at a minimum. Above that, it's almost sinister. Like, she's really creepy.
Struggling to be nice to me.
Yes, that is exactly what it's like. It's also like, it's that same thing. It's like that saccharine sweet, like none of this is real. Like, it's like, damn, girl, you could have not said anything. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't need you to come in here and tell me this obviously bullshit story and then try to struggle to be nice in my face.
Like, it's painful to talk to me.
That's what it looks like. She looks like she's in pain. So Chris says it's okay. He wasn't trying to snitch. And she's like, snitch? He says, you know, rat you out, crickets. And she's like, oh, tattletale. And he's like, damn, this
is... like Mars attack, take off her mask.
Dante, yes, that's like what it feels like. And we just really have to keep going. But he's like, what is happening right now? The way she says it is very ominous. She's like, oh, I assure you, I don't answer to anyone. And Chris is like, right.
But you work for these people, so you...
So what are you saying right now?
Well, you know what you need to do? Do like your friend Walter and shut up and mind your business.
So Walter said, let me go back to the business that pays me. That's the only relatable thing a single person in this movie has said. That's when Chris says, when there are too many white people, he gets nervous. And that's when Georgina's smile drops. And she's looking at him. Again, it's like a pained look on her face. Her eyes are starting to well up with tears. And she looks like she's like desperately trying to say something to him, but it's like she can't. And then she just starts smiling again with the creepy smile, and she's laughing with her mouth, but her eyes are still
Like watering.
crying. Yes, there's tears coming out of her eyes, and she just starts saying no, 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 over and over again. And then she says, that's not my experience at all.
Shut up, Terry Crews.
That's Dante.
Oh, Terry Crews, bitch ass. Like, shut up.
She says that the Armitages are so good to them, they treat them like family. And then she hurries out of the room. And Chris is like, this bitch is crazy. So when Chris goes back downstairs, Dean is introducing him to more of their friends, all white people, and a sole Japanese guy.
But you voted for Obama 3 times, you said. But you don't know no black people?
You don't have a single black friend at this party? Oh no, yes they do. Logan.
Oh. Oh.
So let me shut my fat ass up because there is a single black person here.
How could I be so silly?
I know. So the Japanese guy asks Chris if he finds that being African American is more of an advantage or a disadvantage in the modern world. I am so fucking weary. Read a book. That's what I would have said. I would have been like, watch the news. Read a fucking book. But Chris is really over it too. And he's like, this fucking son of a bitch. So he just laughs and he's like, I don't know. Because how do you answer that question in the environment that you're in right now?
Watch your fist.
He's in a really awkward position right now. So that's when he's like, oh, Logan. He calls him over and he asks him, he's like, can you answer this man's question about the African American experience? And Logan starts to say that the African American experience for him has been, for the most part, very good. And that's when Chris is like, all right. He's done. He rolls his eyes. He's like, I'm done. So Logan is babbling on about how he loves doing chores and some shit. But Chris is pulling out his phone to take a picture of Logan because at this point he's like, this dude is a clown and I need to show Rod. But as he does it, the flash goes off. And that's when everybody pauses, including Logan. And then Logan gets this terrified look on his face and his nose starts bleeding. And he tells Chris to get out. And Chris starts apologizing, thinking that he's offended Logan with the camera flash, but Logan just starts barreling towards Chris, desperately telling him to get out. Logan then grabs Chris by the shirt, and he's just like, get out, get the fuck out, over and over and over again. And that's when Jeremy and some other party goers grab Logan, and they start dragging him away as Logan is screaming. Dante...
Wait, why I'm already out the door?
He said, get out. He attacked me. That would be literally like the second person to attack him at this point, right? If you're not including what the mom did as some kind of attack. Chris, we cut to the parlor and Chris is sitting on the sofa with Rose listening to Dean explain what he thinks happened. What are we doing right now? Chris,
Being an asshole, being a whole dummy.
that's the only way that I can explain it because Chris, I'm weary. Dean is telling Chris and Rose that Logan had a seizure and that's what triggered his aggression.
I know what a seizure looks like.
Dante.
What world are we living in? That's not a seizure.
But wait, Dante, let's keep going because I'm starting to get a headache because
Okay, I'm
let's
sorry.
keep going. Because that's when Logan emerges from Missy's office with Fat Philomena and he apologizes. He's also back to his Magoo self and he leaves. Dean invites everyone to play bingo to like liven up the mood, but Rose suggests that she and Chris go for a walk. While they're by the lake, Chris is like, my cousin is epileptic. What just happened right there, that was not a seizure. And Rose says, well, my dad is a neurosurgeon, so I'm inclined to believe him. Dante, that would have been the end of the discussion. That would have been the end of the discussion. Bitch,
Everybody knows what a seizure is.
do you really think that that's what just happened? I just told you that my cousin is epileptic.
I've seen seizures all the time.
I couldn't believe that she said that because let's put our fucking thinking caps on right now.
Right the hell no.
Why would you even say that to me? And Chris is like, bitch, believe what you want to believe, but that wasn't a fucking seizure. And I don't give a fuck what your dad is. Like, you're not going to convince me of something that I 100% know. Now, he didn't say all of that, but he did say it wasn't a seizure. So Chris also says that when Logan was coming at him, he felt like he knew him. Not necessarily Logan, but he's like the man that came at me after the flash. So something about him seemed really familiar. Chris also tells Rose that he's upset about her mom hypnotizing him because he says that it's been making him think all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm sure that, you know, beyond, you know, this is a horror movie, but if it wasn't, you know, but beyond making him feel very uncomfortable and paranoid and thinking all these things, she dredged up memories that I'm sure Chris had buried deep, deep down inside. He told you on several occasions he did not want to talk about his mom. He doesn't want to remember it. And so then you brought it up to get him to stop smoking, bitch. Does that sound insane?
Good, yes. But not insane enough because he haven't cussed her out yet.
Nor has he left.
Right.
So he then tells her that he just wants to leave. And Rose says, without me? And Chris is like, whatever you want, whatever you decide. So Rose gets upset and she starts crying.
Now we can't talk.
Well, I was really frustrated in this moment because Chris is in a position where he's extremely upset. He's been done extremely wrong. He wants to leave he's setting, you know, his own boundaries for his own comfort and for what he feels is his own safety. But now you're making it about you by starting to cry. And now he has to put his feelings aside to focus on you and make you feel better. When it's like you have been so dismissive of him this entire trip. This really pissed me off. Now, while all of this is happening, they're having this conversation. We keep getting these shots of Dean Armitage. He's hosting some sort of silent game with his guests. It's quiet what's happening. They're doing this in total silence, but he keeps raising a certain number of fingers. And his guests are raising their bingo cards. And the camera's slowly panning out on Dean and this game. And then we see that there is a large picture of Chris that is set up behind Dean. And we, as the audience, come to the horrifying realization that right now, Dean is actually holding an auction for Chris. Missy and Jeremy are also there, so there can be no question at this point if they are complicit in any of this. All of these people are against Chris. They get to the highest bidder at the auction, and it is Jim Hudson, the art dealer. So now we know that this can't be good for Chris, but we're not exactly sure what is about to happen. So when we cut back to the lake, there's Chris and Rose, and Chris is opening up to Rose about his mother to give her some context. And I was actually reading, I can't remember if I put this in the fun facts or not. So Jordan Peele said that Daniel Kaluuya, he struggled with one scene in the movie, and it was this one by the lake where Chris and Rose are stopping to talk. And he said that Daniel Kaluuya, who's black, he couldn't understand the character's motivation in not just immediately leaving without Rose, which is some real shit, right? Because in the real world, I feel like most people would. He didn't understand why he wasn't running for his life after everything that he'd experienced. And the fact that Andre had just finished screaming at him to get out, which in itself is also very unsettling. So Peele explained that Rose had become like family to Chris, who was still really haunted by the guilt of his mother dying. And so in this moment, he needed to prove to himself and to her that he was not a man that would abandon his family. So once Jordan Peele explained all of that to Kaluuya, then he was able to really nail the scene. And that is what he conveys here, because as they're sitting there and he's explaining to her about his mother, he reveals that he did nothing for his mom. He sat there and he was watching TV. He didn't go looking for her. He didn't call anyone. He just sat there kind of frozen, kind of paralyzed. And Rose kind of already knew that. She's telling him, you were only 11 years old, like it's not your fault. And he's like, yes, but I guess what he had not mentioned to her earlier was that his mother survived the initial hit. But she actually lay there bleeding to death on the side of the road. It actually took her some time to die. So had he done something, called someone, then his mom might have survived. There was enough time. But instead, he says she died cold and alone on the side of the road, and he feels a tremendous amount of guilt about that. And these are all the feelings that Missy has brought up with the hypnosis. Additionally, they hit the deer on the side of the road, which is another reason that was so haunting to him, because it reminded him of what happened with his mom. So he was already in a crazy headspace coming out here. So he then turns to Rose and he tells her that she is all that he has. So that leads me to believe that Chris doesn't have any other family. Once his mom was gone, that was it. And so that is why he feels such a tremendous connection to Rose, I guess.
Okay.
Because he has abandonment issues. I don't want to say abandonment because it's not like his mom abandoned him, but his dad wasn't in the picture and his mom died really young, and he has this complex, this guilt.
So fruck ride, I guess. But keep going. Please go.
That's what I said, the same thing.
We'll be here forever because that, I guess you got to explain it so the movie don't end in 30 minutes. Keep going because I really don't have nothing. Like, that's a stupid.
I am right there with you. But he tells her that he's not going to leave without her. He wants her to come with him. And so she's thrilled about this, and they kiss and they embrace, they exchange I love yous. And she decides that she is going to make up an excuse and they're going to leave together because all of this has sucked so far. This is a really horrible, shitty weekend. So as they're walking back to the house, all the guests are leaving. But we, as the audience, have a very tense feeling now because we know that Chris is in trouble. Whether he realizes the amount of trouble that he's in or not, we, as the audience, know that something bad is about to happen. So they're back in Rose's room, and Chris sends the picture that he took of Logan to Rod, and Rod immediately calls him, and he's like, that's Dre. Andre Hayworth, we know this guy. We know people that he used to date. And Chris is like, I fucking knew it. I knew that I knew him. And Chris is like, he's different. And Rod is like, no shit. Why the hell is he dressed like Eddie Bauer's summer catalog? And Chris is like, no, it's not just about the way that he's dressed, although that is mad Magoo. He says that he came to the party with a white woman 30 years older than him. And then Rod's like, I fucking told you. Sex slave. I fucking told you. And Rod is insistently telling Chris, you need to get the fruck out of there right now. That's when Chris's phone dies. But Chris doesn't fucking leave. He doesn't leave. With that information, I don't know. I would feel alarmed, right? Am I crazy?
Why are you asking me if you're crazy when you know I had never even made it to the house?
What I know is Dante wouldn't even be there. Him and that carrot cake would already be back in the city in that immaculately furnished apartment.
Because I got a place to live.
Well, when Rose comes back in the room, he tells her that they need to leave right now, right this very second. He'll explain in the car, but they need to frickin' go.
You trust her still?
Well, she agrees. And she says that she needs to go grab her bag. She leaves the room, goes downstairs. So while he is packing, he notices that closet door is open again, and now the curiosity has gotten the better of him, and he goes to look inside. Inside, he finds a shoebox, and in the shoebox, he finds pictures of Rose. And they start out innocently enough, but then he gets to a photo of her with a black guy, and his arm is around her, which is very weird to him because remember, Rose told him that he was the first black guy that she had ever been with. I'm frustrated that Chris believes this. Yes, but let's keep going because I don't want to, we're so close. So he keeps flipping through the pictures, and it's just picture after picture after picture of her with different black men. One of those men being Walter, looking very normal, very African American, not Magoo. And then the last picture is her with her arm wrapped around Georgina, but a normal Georgina with her natural hair out, not in the 1956 wig that she's been wearing the whole movie. Also looking real black. And it's dawning on him, I guess, that something is really wrong with Rose. But when she comes back in the room, he hides that he saw the pictures, and that's when he asks her if she has the keys. He wants to put the bags in the trunk. And she drops to the floor and she's like, oh yeah, they're in my bag somewhere. So she kneels down to look for them. She's struggling to find them, and she's like, they must be in here somewhere. And he's like, you can't find them? What's going on? So he's like, let's do this on the move. Just find the keys. We'll go to the car. When they get downstairs, Jeremy is standing in front of the front door, twirling his lacrosse stick, and Chris is super uneasy now. Rose is just not looking for those keys fast enough. And in my opinion, I feel like Jeremy's coming off real threateningly, and I probably
whooped his ass.
I would have probably been
because when I got down there and he's standing in front of the door, what the fuck you in front of the door for?
And why do you have the lacrosse stick?
It would have been 0 to 100 so fast. Like they would have been like, what should we do? Because this is crazy. Like when we did the Devil's Reject and we were like, oldest driving us here guns, I'm about to crash this car.
I'm going to crash this fucking car.
Everybody, I will kill everybody. I don't give a fuck about nobody. Don't you understand that? Don't you understand? You gotta let these kind of people know that I will kill you. We will be in here and you will die. I don't give a fuck. You thought I gave a fuck after you let me not have cake? Oh no. because I'm home.
But yeah, so Jeremy's standing in front of the door, and that's when Missy comes out and she offers everybody some tea. And Chris is like, no, thank you, we're leaving. And when she asks why, he looks to Rose to provide an excuse. And Rose says that his dog got sick. He needs to be at the vet first thing in the morning. And Missy's like, oh, that's too bad. But the vibe in the room is very, very tense.
Yes.
The tension is palpable right now. So that's when Jeremy gets closer to Chris. That's when Dean comes into view in another room, and he starts asking Chris about what is his purpose in life. And Chris is like, oh, shit. He's like, well, right now it's to find the fucking keys to the car. Rose, hello. And Jeremy is just steadily moving closer to him. And Dean is starting to say some really crazy shit about the sun dying and how they're gods trapped in cocoons. And at this point, Chris is like, what the fuck, Rose? Where are the goddamn keys? The scene is another scene that is extremely well done.
Yes.
Chris is so on edge, so heightened, and he's standing in a position where he feels like, okay, he's in the living room. He has his eyes on everyone. He's trying to protect his back, which is smart. But it's like everybody's just like kind of closing in on him, and he doesn't really know what to do.
And he's desperately trying to believe this bitch.
Yes, he wants really, really desperately for her to just be like, oh, I found the keys, let's go. He is like praying inside that this would happen. And so now at this point, Rose is starting to cry because she can't find the keys. She's panicking. And finally, Chris starts screaming at her at the top of his lungs, Rose, give me the keys now, Rose, the keys. And that's when Jeremy takes a swing at Chris with the lacrosse stick. And Chris dodges it, and Rose is in the background crying like, what the fuck is going on? And Jeremy's getting closer. Missy and Dean are coming closer. And at this point, Chris just sounds so defeated. Yeah. And he asks her, where are the keys, Rose? And she looks at him distressed. She has her crying face. And then it just switches on a dime to a completely blank stare. She holds up the keys and she says, you know I can't give you the keys, right? And Chris is just so brokenhearted right now because he is in a horrible situation, because now he realizes that every single person in this house is against him. This was all a setup. It's such a well done scene.
Because you think, well, Georgina probably took the keys.
Yes, because us, like Chris, are really holding out hope that maybe, just maybe, Rose could possibly not be in on this. I mean, she's really seemed like she was on Chris's side this whole time, for the most part. She's stressed right now. I mean, she's really putting on a show because she is upset, crying about these keys. She seems like she's frantically looking for them.
Your purse ain't that deep, bitch.
But realistically, you would have dumped all that shit out, because this is getting very, very tense right now. Jeremy took a swing at Chris. So he goes to lunge at Jeremy, but just then Missy taps her teacup with her spoon, and Chris just stands stark still and then falls backwards and hits the floor. So as Dean and Jeremy are picking him up off the floor, we see Chris's perspective, and he's sinking back into the sunken place. And he is only watching what's happening through a small window into the outside world. While he is watching, really fighting to pull himself back up, Rose peeks at him and tells him that he was one of her favorites before he is kind of just left there at the bottom of the sunken place. The next day, Rod keeps trying to call Chris because he hasn't heard from him, but he just keeps getting his voicemail. So that night, Rod searches for Andre Hayworth, and that's when he realizes that Andre had been reported missing 6 months ago. It's all over news sites. So Rod knows that something is seriously wrong. When we cut back to Chris, he is waking up in a room strapped to a chair in front of a TV. And there's a big deer head mounted on the wall, too. It's making him very uncomfortable. So as Chris is struggling to get out, the TV comes on and an infomercial of sorts starts to play. And it is Roman Armitage, Rose's grandfather. And he is informing just whoever he's watching, because I guess they show this video to a lot of people, of what exactly is going on.
Very Heaven's Gate.
It's giving that, yes. And the video is obviously very old, too. It was obviously recorded a long time ago, just to give you an idea of like how long they've been doing this. So he tells Chris that he's been chosen because of the physical advantages that he's enjoyed his entire life. And he goes on to tell Chris about a procedure called the coagula. So it's something that was developed by the order that the Armitage family is a part of, and then perfected by his son Dean, who is a neurosurgeon. He then tells Chris essentially with his body and then their brains, they can create something great. He then says, "Behold the coagula," as the whole Armitage family, including Jeremy and Rose as kids. Then the screen switches to Missy's teacup, and Chris is terrified, but there isn't anything that he can do. She puts him back under. He falls unconscious. So then we cut back to Rod, and he's at the police station meeting with our girl, Detective Maxine Shaw.
Girl, Maxine Shaw, attorney at law. Back on the case.
Rod is trying to report Chris missing, and he even shows the detective the picture of Andre, who has also been reported missing, been missing for the past 6 months. And he tells Maxine Shaw, attorney at law, that he believes that they are abducting black men, brainwashing them through hypnosis, and making them sex slaves, which isn't far off from the truth. But she hears this, she calls him some other officers to listen to the story, and Rod is really spitting all facts, no filler. But they just laugh in his face and they don't believe him.
So get other cops.
I understand what the detective is saying when he points out Andre, who's been missing for 6 months, and he shows her the picture and he's like, well, I guess he's not missing. I kind of get that, because it's like he's alive and well at this point. An adult can do whatever they want. They can leave. Yeah, so I get that. But she's not taking him seriously because he's talking about Chris, and he's like, oh yeah, well, Chris is 26 and he left for a weekend with his girlfriend. He was supposed to come back. I have his dog. At that point, no matter how you feel about the subject, you take the report. You know what I mean? Like, you do a wellness check.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Their reaction is annoying and like kind of unbelievable. I know that police don't always take missing adult stuff seriously, especially missing black people, especially missing black men. So it's like, I understand why Jordan Peele put this in here. But all that happens, and so now at this point, it's up to Rod to figure this whole thing out. So later that night, Rod tries calling Chris again, and this time Rose answers the phone, and looking like a bona fide psychopath in a white turtleneck and a too tight ponytail. And she is trying to sound concerned, and she tells Rod that Chris left 2 days earlier. He got all paranoid, freaked out, got in a cab, and left his phone. And she's sitting there utterly stone-faced, no emotion on her face, while she's pretending to sound super upset over the phone, giving very, very, very much psychopath.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, she killed this scene. So then Rod mentioned that he went to the police And that's when she starts to like stutter a little bit, and Rod immediately knows that she's lying. So he asks her, well, what cab company did he use? And she can't say. She can't say whether he got in a cab or an Uber, and that's weird.
You said he got in the cab.
Yeah, you said that he got in a cab, so now you don't know if it was a cab, it was an Uber. Wouldn't he need his phone for an Uber? What are you talking about? And then when you call somebody, y'all live in kind of the middle of nowhere, so there would have been like some awkward dead time where you're trying to convince him not to leave and he's waiting for the cab. You know what I mean? So what she's saying doesn't ring true. So Rod decides to record her, but at this point, because this isn't her first rodeo, she realizes what Rod is doing. So she starts to say some really out of pocket stuff. And she's like, I know that Rod, you only called because you like me and you want to have sex with me and stuff like that. So Rod is getting very flustered and he curses at her and he's like, I was just calling to find out about Chris. And so then he hangs up on her and the Armitages are there watching. I don't think she played that well. She got him flustered now in order to not be recorded saying something crazy. But Chris is still very much missing. So I don't
Well,
know.
you know, pride comes before the fall.
Well, touche. So then we cut back to Chris and he wakes up again, still strapped to the chair, and the TV comes back on. This time it's live footage of Jim Hudson, who is in a hospital bed with his head shaved, and he's talking to Chris through an intercom in the room. And Chris immediately asks, where's Rose? Chris, Chris, let it go. Jim Hudson is like, well, you're one of the lucky ones because he was trapped by Rose. Instead of Jeremy, who he says his wrangling methods are like a lot more painful because we've seen how Jeremy wrangles people. But Jim says he is there to answer any questions that Chris may have because them having a mutual understanding apparently makes the procedure more of a success. So Jim goes on to explain the procedure to Chris, telling him that phase 1 was the hypnosis. Phase 2, which is what Chris is in right now, is kind of like a psychological pre-op, preparing Chris for phase 3, which is the transmutation. Now, Chris hears pre-op, and he's like, fucking come again? And that's when it fully hits Chris what's happening. So essentially, Jim's brain is going to be transferred into Chris's body. Chris's brain will be all but removed except for a small portion that is connected to his nervous system, which is too dangerous to remove. So Chris won't be gone completely. A part of him will still be inside of his body, but Jim will be controlling it and Chris will have limited consciousness. So essentially, he will still be able to see and hear, but his existence will be as a passenger or an audience member. So he'll be watching through that TV that we've seen when he's in the sunken place. So that's when Chris starts flashing back to Georgina and Andre, those times when they started to freak out and kind of a small sliver of their real selves showed. And when Chris realizes that he's going to be like them and kind of stuck in this sunken place, he's obviously devastated. And he asks Jim, why black people? And Jim says he doesn't know. Some people want to be stronger or faster or cooler. And that's when Chris starts remembering all of the people at that party who were touching him, asking him those crazy questions, asking to see his golf form, and just really kind of looking at him like a piece of meat. They were all just kind of testing him to see if they wanted to purchase him in the auction. But Jim says that he doesn't want to be lumped in with those people because he's like, I don't really care if you're black or not. He just wants Chris's eyes. The things that make Chris such a good artist. Jim then cuts out and Chris is left sitting there. We then get a shot of him examining his chair where he's been scratching at it and the cotton stuffing of the chair is starting to come out. And that gives him an idea. So we cut away for a second, and when we cut back to Chris, he is still sitting, lamenting. When the TV comes back on, it's Missy's teacup to hypnotize him again. He tries to resist, but he can't. He falls unconscious. Now we get a shot of the surgery room. It's set up with 2 beds. Jim Hudson is already on one under anesthesia. Dean and Jeremy are performing surgery on him, and we see Dean cut off the top of Jim's head, and he is preparing for the brain transfer. So now Jeremy goes to get Chris. After he takes off Chris's restraints, he is preparing to give him an IV and transfer him to a wheelchair when Chris stands up behind him, grabs, I think it's a bocce ball, and he cracks Jeremy in the head with it. He then hits him again and again, cracking his head, blood's pooling all around him. And we then see Chris remove cotton from his ears that he'd taken from inside the chair. And that's how he was able to keep from getting hypnotized, because he couldn't hear the teacup. And I was like, I probably would have left the cotton in my ears the whole time, right? You don't know what the hell's going to happen, because that's how she caught you before. You went to fight Jeremy and she just hit that teacup and you fell out. If for any reason she gets that teacup, you're like back in the position that you're in, right?
True. But the movie needs to end, and also I think that if they saw him walking, they would be so caught off guard they wouldn't know what to do. As we'll see.
Well, yeah. Chris then takes that big deer head off the wall, and when Dean walks out into the hallway to find Jeremy, he runs Dean through with the deer's antlers, stabbing him in the neck.
How'd that make you feel?
I loved it.
I felt like with every attack, they just got more and more delicious.
Yes.
And it only gets better. It's only about to get better.
I love it. I'm big fan, no notes. So when Dean falls over, dying, he knocks over a candle and the surgery room is set on fire.
Oops.
Yeah. I know that we didn't talk about it before, but I wasn't doing like a kill count, but like, I guess if we are, Jeremy just died, Dean just died, and Jim Hudson is about to die too, right? Because his whole brain is exposed and this whole basement is now being set on fire. Oh yeah, by the way, the surgery room is in the basement, so there isn't any black mold after all. So then Chris heads upstairs where he finds Georgina in the kitchen just knitting in her robe, because she's like, this is my fucking house. She is shocked when she sees Chris and she runs away. And that's when Chris spots Missy. And they stare at each other for a moment. She's not really sure
what to do.
Yeah. And they both look down at her teacup, and it is sitting on a table that is equidistant from both of them. And so Chris knows what it is. So they both run for it. And thankfully, Chris is able to knock it off of the table onto the floor and shatter it. So they're then left just looking at each other until Missy grabs a letter opener and she goes to stab Chris, but Chris puts his hand up and the letter opener just goes through the palm of his hand. He just takes it too. He doesn't cry out. He doesn't react. He just then takes his hand and he stabs Missy to death with the letter opener that's still embedded in his hand.
I love this scene because she's so scared. It's so satisfying.
Yes.
And she knows that if he got out, that he killed them.
Yeah. He's also covered in blood.
Oh, yeah. And she knows that he is not going to spare her. And she's scared. And Catherine Keenan does a really good job of being scared.
She does a really good job, especially after the teacup gets broken.
Because you're nothing.
Mm-hmm. And additionally, she's looking at him and there isn't anything to be said, right?
I love that.
She doesn't say a word. This whole fight happens without
Any dialogue.
Yeah. Because there's nothing to say, right? There is no sorry, there is no pleading because it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like what you did is so diabolical. He's not going to spare you. So it's kill or be killed. And she tries to stab him and it doesn't work. And she knows that she's frucked. And then she gets it stabbed.
I loved it.
Yeah.
It was my favorite scene.
So after he stabs Missy, so in the hallway, he's going to try to walk out the front door, but Jeremy has come to and he catches Chris and he puts Chris in a headlock. And Chris tries to open I hate Jeremy. And Chris tries to open the front door twice, but Jeremy keeps kicking it closed. And Chris is almost to the point of passing out. He's very close, but he wakes himself up. He tries the door one more time. And so when Jeremy goes to kick it, Chris stabs Jeremy in the leg with the letter opener that's still in his hand. Jeremy falls to the floor, and Chris ends up stomping Jeremy to death. Lots of sound. They don't show it, but lots of sound.
They had such violent deaths. It was so satisfying.
It was extremely satisfying. And so he ends up taking his car keys. So now Missy's also died. So that's 4 deaths so far.
Since Rose couldn't find the keys. Get my own damn keys.
Right. Now Rose is upstairs, but she can't hear any of the racket that's coming from downstairs because she's being a psycho to the max. So she has headphones in. She's listening to Time of My Life, which is insane. She's eating Fruit Loops, but she has them like segregated from the milk. So on this silver platter, she has a bowl of dry Fruit Loops and a tall glass of milk with a fucking straw in it. And she's eating the Fruit Loops like one by one, but not even like popping them in her mouth. She's like biting them. If you haven't seen the scene, watch the scene. It's psychotic. And then when she eats a Fruit Loop, she goes and drinks the milk through a straw. I don't know. It's very crazy. And then the drive home, she's using Bing. What a psycho. And she's searching for basketball players that are going to be her next victim. And I'm like, she thinks really highly of herself, right?
I've been asking the entire episode why he like her.
Well, so she's saying that she's looking for her next victim, and then the camera pans out, and she has all the pictures of her victims that Chris found earlier. Now she has them framed and hung up on her bedroom wall right above her bed, like trophies.
She's a slut.
She's insane. She's an evil person.
You think she's the worst?
Maybe. She seems the most unhinged. I don't know. Maybe not unhinged. She seems the absolute coldest of them all.
It's just like, I'm trying to think now that the bag gets out of the bag, like what parts are like her character and what parts are her like personality. You know, like what parts of it is like who she is as a person and what parts are like the character she was playing.
I don't think that she displayed a single part of her personality at any time. Yeah, I think that she compartmentalized herself and just became what she thought.
As a human?
Yes. She's completely changed. I mean, it's really disturbing, I guess.
It is.
She does a really good job because I hate her so much. She does a really, really, really good job of making me hate her.
The actress?
Yes. But when Chris gets into Jeremy's car, we can see that it's the white Porsche from the beginning of the movie, and then that black knight's helmet is on the front seat. So that's just confirming for sure that Jeremy was the person who kidnapped Andre. But Chris is driving off and he's on the phone with 911 when Georgina jumps in front of the car and Chris hits her. So he's in a state of turmoil because he doesn't want to go back to get her, but he does because he can't just leave her lying there in the middle of the driveway hit because he remembers his mother dying alone on the road, and he flashes back to that kind of freak out that Georgina was having. He knows that some of the black woman that was at a time Georgina is still in there. So he just kind of feels obligated to go back.
I guess.
I mean, I get he's trying to do the right thing, and I get it.
I
He
do.
carries a lot of
Guilt.
But he puts Georgina in the car.
Like a fool. What's she gonna do with her?
Yeah, I don't know. So he puts her in the car, he drives off with her, and as he's driving off, we see Rose walk onto the porch with a rifle, and she sees in the car Georgina, and she says grandma, revealing that it is her grandma inside Georgina. So she pursues them. At the end of the long driveway, Georgina wakes up and her 1957 wig is slipping off of her head, and that's when we get a look at the huge scar that she has going around her head from the surgery that she had, the coagula. She then attacks Chris for ruining her house, and Chris ends up running into a tree, injuring himself and killing Georgina. So that's the fifth death. When Chris exits the car, Rose is shooting at him with the rifle. And we then hear her say, "Get him, Grandpa." And we see Walter come running up to chase Chris down, confirming that Walter is actually Roman Armitage. So after Walter tackles Chris, his hat falls off, and we can see that he too has that huge scar on his head.
Was that a big reveal to you?
That it was.
Just get it, Grandpa, get it, Grandma.
I think that if you'd been paying attention, you probably figure already. I think that this was just like confirmation.
Yeah. It just kind of fell flat. I don't know if it was supposed to like be a scene that was such a reveal when it was just more just like, yeah, obviously everybody who is black and who he's met is,
No, they've gone through the procedure.
The procedure.
No, I agree. And I think that he gave enough hints that you would know that. I think this is just offering the confirmation, just like him having Chris ride in Jeremy's Porsche and having the knight's helmet on the front seat. We know those things. So Walter's tackled Chris and he almost gets the better of Chris, but that's when Chris takes his cell phone and he ends up taking a flash photo of Walter. So we know what that means. Walter stands up. The blood is running from his nose, just like it happened with Andre. And I guess Rose didn't see this happen because when Walter looks at her, he tells Rose to let him shoot Chris. So she hands him the rifle and he ends up, no hesitation, shooting Rose in the stomach. And he then turns the gun on himself and shoots himself in the head. So when Chris sits up, he sees that Rose is still alive and she's going for the rifle. So he moves it and he ends up kneeling over her, and she tries to manipulate him by telling him that she's so sorry and she loves him, but he just starts to strangle her, which, good, yes, good for you. As he's strangling her, she starts to smile like a maniac. So he stops and he can't do it. And she's really confused by this because I don't think that she is a person that could understand
empathy.
Yes. So just then we see a police car pull up, lights flashing, and Rose starts calling out, "Help me," like a victim. Bitch. And then Chris puts his hands up, expecting the worst. But when the car door opens, we see airport written on the side, and then we see that Rod has come to Chris's rescue. Chris could not be more relieved to see him. So he stumbles to the car and they leave Rose there to die. So in the car, there's a long silence before Rod just cannot help himself. And he says, I mean, I told you not to go into that house, which he did. So when Chris asked Rod how he found him, Rod said, I'm TS motherfucking A. It's what we do. And I was like, I know TSA agents all over the country. We're like, that's right.
We the backbone of this country.
What? Oh, wait. Because when Rod was talking to the detective, they were asking him like how he knew all that stuff, and he was like, well, you know, he's like, I'm TSA, so I take all the same courses that y'all do to be detectives. He's like, but if anything, my shit is probably more intense because we're dealing with some terrorist shit. Y'all wouldn't know anything about that. So Rod is like that TSA agent, okay? So he's like mad serious about his job. So I was like, I know TSA agents were like proud saluting this man because he really showed up and showed out for TSA because people hate TSA. So they then drive off, leaving the bloodbath at the Armitage house behind, and we see that Rose does definitely die, and so that was the 6th and 7th on-screen kill, Walter and Rose, and that's when the end credits start to roll. And that is the end of the movie. So the Rotten Tomatoes for this movie, so it's a 98% critic and an 86% audience. And I don't know why, but I was kind of offended at 86% audience.
People go in just to be mad.
I agree 100%. It does have a 7.8 out of 10 on IMDb with 703,000 reviews. I think it should have at least a solid 8, but okay. So the kill count is 7. And fun facts. So Rotten Tomatoes actually named Get Out as its best rated film of 2017. So it was sitting at a really, really, really high rating initially when it came out. It only started to go down like over time. So I saw a tagline for this movie. I just thought that this was so good because I was like, this really embodies the whole feel of the movie, but also the whole feel of, I guess, a part of like the African American experience in general. The tagline is, just because you're invited doesn't mean you're welcome. And I was like, what an amazing tagline.
I love that.
Me too. But domestically, the film became the highest grossing debut horror film on an original screenplay with $176 million, and it actually dethroned the Blair Witch Project's 1999, nearly 2-decade-long record of over $140 million. It was chosen by the National Board of Review, the American Film Institute, and Time as one of the top 10 films of that year. And it actually won Best Original Screenplay at the Academy Awards, and it was nominated for Best Picture. Jordan Peele was nominated for Best Director, and Daniel Kaluuya was nominated for Best Actor. But Jordan Peele was actually the 4th Black writer to be nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. So the previous nominees were Suzanne DePass with Lady Sings the Blues, Spike Lee with Do the Right Thing, and John Singleton with Boys in the Hood. But Peele was actually the first Black person to win that award. For the film, Jordan Peele actually became the 5th African-American filmmaker to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Director. So previously, John Singleton, Boys in the Hood, Lee Daniels for Precious. It's not a comedy. It is not a comedy. Steve McQueen for 12 Years a Slave and Barry Jenkins for Moonlight were also nominated. It's the 3rd film to win the Academy Award for Best Screenplay, Original or Adapted, after The Exorcist and The Silence of the Lambs, which is a huge deal because we know that horror is notoriously snubbed. 4 other nominated were Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Rosemary's Baby, Young Frankenstein, and The Sixth Sense. So, due to the success of the film, Jordan Peele actually became the first African American film writer, producer, and director to write, produce, and direct a film debut that earned more than 200 million in worldwide box office ticket sales. So, all the shout out, all the flowers to Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele, everybody involved in the movie. So, during a talk about this movie at the 2017 Sundance Film Festival screening, Jordan Peele said that he first got the idea to write the movie during the 2008 Democratic primaries. There was a discussion about whether an African American or a woman was more deserving of the presidency. And he actually wrote the movie around that time, but he said that he felt that the climate at the time was a little too positive and that people wouldn't be receptive to the movie because, like, kind of like we mentioned earlier in the movie, a lot of people after Barack Obama became president believe that we were in like a post-racial United States, that the United States had finally moved beyond like race issues, which was not the case. For anybody that has ever heard of the kind of letters that Barack Obama was getting should know that we were very much not a post-racial country, but everybody was a lot more hopeful at the time. So he was like, I don't think this is the right climate to release the movie. He ended up releasing it in 2017 because it was after a string of really awful, racially motivated murders of African Americans by police. So he felt like it was a better climate to release that people would at least be interested in this story again, in the message that it was trying to send. But one thing that he did change was in the original ending, Chris actually does get arrested at the end for strangling Rose. And this is filmed. You can watch it. I think it's on the DVD.
It's on YouTube too.
It's on YouTube as well. So instead of rescuing Chris, Rod goes to meet him in jail and asks him for information about the Armitage family to investigate more. But Chris insists that he stopped them and that everything is fine. And then they part somberly, and Chris is taken back to his holding cell with the assumption that he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. And Jordan Peele intended to use this ending in order to reflect the realities of racism in America. But after gauging reception at test screenings, he decided that the film needed a happier ending, that people kind of deserved a happier ending because of the climate that we were in. He did want to keep that moment where audience believed that Chris was about to be arrested in order to preserve the intended reaction. So that's why he had Rod pull up with the lights flashing and everything. But then everybody would breathe that sigh of relief when they saw that it was Rod. And I believe that it made for a much better ending to the film. Political climate aside, I just think it was a better ending. Jordan Peele went on to explain at the Sundance Film Festival that he conceived the idea of the twist. He was inspired by the Stepford Wives. So in that movie, spoilers, it's suburban husbands and they end up replacing their wives, like killing their wives and replacing them with compliant robots. So he's talking about the 1975 version. There is a remake of it that is out there. But beyond the Stepford Wives, he also cites Night of the Living Dead as inspiration, kind of mirroring a little bit of Ben in Chris. Another inspiration for the movie was actually Rosemary's Baby.
That's funny.
Yeah, with the significant other being in on the plot. So during an appearance on Late Night with Seth Meyers, Allison Williams, the actress that plays Rose, she said that many of the movie's white viewers have a hard time comprehending or accepting her character's villainy. So they would come up to her and she would said, quote, they'd say she was hypnotized, right? And she would tell them, no, she's just evil. And she's like, I don't know why that's so hard to accept. She's bad. And she says, we gave you so many ways to know that she's bad. She has photos of people whose lives she's ended posted behind her. The minute she can, she hangs them back up on her wall. That's so crazy. And she said that people are still like, but maybe she's also a victim. And she's like, no. she says, I will say that it is 100% white people that have that view, that have a view that Rose is some sort of victim when she is very, very, very much not. She's very complicit.
She's like the worst.
Yeah, if anything, I think that she's worse. I think that she might be the worst because she takes so much pleasure in it and gets so close to the people that she's going to kill, which is really diabolical. She was with Chris for 5 months, and that entire time you were only with him, you only showed him affection, everything you did for him was all leading to you killing him. That's really crazy. You form this like bond with somebody that you're leading to slaughter. The other members of the family know their victims max 2 days. So, yeah. So funny. So Marcus Henderson, who plays Walter the groundskeeper / Roman Armitage, so he pointed out that many of the actions he's seen performing were deliberately like inherently nonsensical. So he points out that when you see Walter, he's walking around with a rake, and he's like, who tries to rake an entire estate? That's crazy. And then you see him using one of those like old school lawnmowers, like the kind that just like spins, like it's not an electric lawnmower. And he said that you just automatically assume that he was a gardener because he was doing gardening things. But if you look at him in straight detail, just for any amount of time, it makes no sense. And Jordan Peele said that he inserted this detail as an Easter egg to hint at the fact that Walter is not really a gardener or even someone who is used to doing any type of manual labor, since his consciousness is really that of Roman Armitage.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah. Regarding the sunken place, Jordan Peele has said, quote, the sunken place means we are marginalized. It's a place where, like, no matter how hard we scream, the system silences us. That's what he was trying to convey with the sunken place. And then the movie was actually shot in Alabama for budget reasons, but Jordan Peele really, really, really wanted to avoid having it look at all like it was anywhere in the South. And he said, and this goes along with the themes, this theme of like the post-racial America, because he says it's really important to me to not have the villains in this film reflect the typical red state type who is usually categorized as being racist. It felt like that was way too easy. He said, I wanted this film to explore the false sense of security one can have with the sort of New York liberal type. And that is a heavy part of the theme of this movie. It's the, I guess, well-meaning liberals that think that they don't see color, this whole like color blindness thing, when in reality it's like,
They're the worst.
yes. So that's all that I have. I know that was a lot of facts. I know that this has been a little long, but I think that this movie is great. I think it's very important, and I think that Jordan Peele deserves the time. But with all that being said, what do you think? Do you think this movie is a hit or a miss?
I think this movie is a hit. I think this is a great movie. After all that we have said, all the facts, and what it speaks on, and just how relatable it was watching it as a black person.
Mm-hmm.
What I also want to say is it is always a treat to experience new horror films that tell new stories with new IPs, and that can never be
Mm-hmm.
understated. I think everyone was just a very, very, very talented Cast very well casted. Just
Mm-hmm.
some of the scenes, some of the cinematography is amazing. So I mean, go on and on how great the movie is. It's a great watch. It's one that you should definitely check out if you haven't seen it. And again, I just cannot stress enough how awesome it is to experience new horror with a new IP, and it kind of shows that when with the right mix of things, horror can be recognized, by the masses. I mean, this movie won an Academy Award for its writing, so that's very telling.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I also think that this movie is a hit. I think it is unequivocally a hit. I think that the acting is outstanding. I mean, Daniel Kaluuya's performance is like out of this world. And I'm really glad that Jordan Peele gave him this spotlight because, as we know, Daniel Kaluuya went on to make some amazing movies after this, and he got his first Academy Award for Judas and the Black Messiah. He's also in Jordan Peele's Nope. I just think that every time Daniel Kaluuya is on the screen, he knocks it out of the park. And Allison Williams does a great job because I hate her. So she did a really good job. And then Lil Rel did a really good job as Rod. I don't think that his performance can be understated as well. It was the exact perfect amount of like comic relief, but it was also that, because I think that Chris is definitely the protagonist of the movie. We are rooting for him, but I feel like the audience aligns with Rod. You know what I mean? The
Yes.
Rod is the audience avatar. He is the one that we see ourselves in because we're sitting and we are also saying like, get out, Chris, get out. Don't go there. Don't do that. And so I just think that the addition of Rod, because Jordan Peele could have made the movie just stone cold serious. He could have gone so many different ways. And I appreciate every casting choice. I appreciate the cinematography so much. I appreciate all the Easter eggs. I appreciate just all the obvious love and care that went into making this movie and the attention to detail. I just really think that it is just a perfect movie. And I know that we were saying that, they probably could have done without the grandpa reveal. That might have been like a little on the nose, but for a directorial debut, I think that this is outstanding. I recommend everybody watch it if you've never seen it. I highly, highly recommend it. Yeah, I mean, I can't recommend it anymore. I mean, I think very highly of it. So, yeah. Jordan Peele, if you ever hear this, we're big fans. Love you. Sponsor us. But so, do you want to tell them about the social media?
Okay. We love to hear from you guys. Please follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook with the handle Did You Get That on Film? You can also email us at didyougetatonfilm@gmail.com. For our Spotify and Apple Podcast listeners, leave us a review as well as a rating. Reviews are the best way to support the podcast and help it reach a further audience.
That sounds great. And that's it for this week. We will see you next week with a brand new episode. So until then, bye.